from Los Angeles. This is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
The way we deal with stress is the most important thing to how our whole body ages. It not only affects...
Dr. Roizen said stress is the greatest ager of all?
It is by far. And the things that you do, your posse and your purpose. So having friends and women befriend, if you will, and friend, and men exercise, if you will. But it is that befriending and that purpose. I mean, the fact that you're bringing this through your TV show and if you will, your live streaming is in fact your purpose, I take it, and a very beneficial one. And you probably feel both stress from that. You got to do it every day, and you got to be on, if you will. But it also is a real stress reducer because you've got a purpose. And in fact, if you look at it, the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 stress relievers in the world are friends and purpose.
Okay.
Now,
so
meditation and guided imagery and progressive muscle relaxation and deep breathing, those are all, if you will, secondary, no place near as potent as posse and purpose.
Wow, that's really good to know. I don't think people think of it in that way because we're all like busy getting those meditation apps on our phones and thinking if we meditate or go to a quiet place. And you said, no, it's those friends and what your life's purpose is. So Dr. Roizen, this difference between your biological age and your immune system age, as a doctor, if someone comes into your office, are you able to visually note that difference, or does there have to be an X-ray or some kind of MRI or some other kind of advanced testing for you to know the differences in those ages?
Well, we can get a little of it from what we call biomarkers of inflammation. And a little of it that way. And also, as you get older, we get a little of it by the chronic diseases you have and levels of that. But in fact, what the data show is that your behaviors, and being honest with your doctor, Areva, but your behaviors are more important in predicting. So when you look at your rate of aging, do you do the 4 components of exercise? Are you doing, if you will, do you have a purpose? Do you talk to 6 friends a month and reveal yourself and be vulnerable to them? Are you vaping? Where do you live? What's the air pollution level there? What foods do you have? And how well do you follow that diet? How do you handle stress? Those actually, when you combine them, those are the, if you will, from a statistical standpoint, are the best predictors of whether you're going to have disability and whether you're going to die. So they relate to both your disability or lack of functioning optimally, as well as your risk of dying. And those are actually better than any set of, if you will, physiologic markers as of now.
So, Dr. Roizen, we know people try to cope with their stress in a lot of different ways. We talked about, the meditation apps. We know a lot of people use alcohol. They have a glass of wine or a martini at the end of the day. And now that marijuana is legal in a lot of states in the U.S., a lot of people are using cannabis products. They're smoking it, they're eating it, they're somehow ingesting it into their bodies. But what impact, let's start with alcohol, what impact on your body does that have if you're trying to reduce your stress by drinking alcohol?
So 1 or 2, a half to 1 drink a night for women, 1 to 2 for men is probably both okay for most people, as long as it isn't 5 drinks a night. And the problem with stress management is that we tend to lie to ourselves, if you will. Well, I just had this 1 drink. It was 12 ounces of wine, if you will, or, and they filled the glass up pretty full. So the point is, we've got to be honest with ourselves, and mixing them isn't necessarily good. And in the
But can you have, as a woman, that 1 to 1.5 drink every night? And is that okay for your body?
If you look at the data, and you're eating with your alcohol, if you will, you're not drinking it totally on an empty stomach, a half to 1 drink a night, even to 2, does not increase your overall risk of mortality or disability. It isn't as good. Wait. It isn't as good as 1/2 to 1 drink a night, 3 to 4 nights a week. It turns out to be the optimal. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether it's red wine or white wine or spirits or beer. They all seem to have the same beneficial effect. Now, if your risk is of cancer or brain disease, those probably should be lower than that. If your risk is of heart disease, that is, if your family has had heart disease or strokes, then those tend to be a beneficial, but it is very little overall benefit, for example, compared to eating a healthy diet or compared to exercise, and clearly compared to stress management. So, but one of the key things when you look at the data on drinking is that drinking alone is much worse from a mortality standpoint and a disability standpoint than drinking with friends. So it may be, and no one has separated this out to my knowledge well, it may be that the benefit of that 1.5 to 1 drink a night for women, 3 to 4 nights a week, or 1 to 2 for men, 3 to 4 nights a week, is because we do it with friends and we're more vulnerable to them at that time, and that's the stress benefit. So we don't really, no one has been able, to my knowledge, to separate those two effects out.
So we always hear, Dr. Roizen, about the impact of alcohol on your liver, your kidney, and other internal organs. So the amount that you just said was, based on the data, an acceptable amount. Those amounts won't negatively impact your kidney or your liver?
If your kidney and liver and heart and brain are in otherwise good shape, meaning you don't have other things that are impeding their function, then that amount of alcohol won't do it. Now, why, and people always ask, why more for men than women? It isn't size. Size makes a little bit of the difference, but it's because we men have alcohol acid dehydrogenase in their stomach and early lining in their early intestine, which gets rid of about half of the alcohol before it gets into our bloodstream. Women don't have that, and certain populations, ethnic populations. So the Asian population tends to have less alcohol dehydrogenase in their stomach and intestinal lining, so they can't handle, if you will, from a standpoint, they can't metabolize the alcohol before it gets into their blood as well.
And you just came out with an article in a health journal talking about cannabis and cannabis use. And we know that, again, since cannabis is now legal in a lot of states, that's also used by a lot of people, young and old, to reduce stress. But one of the things in your article was that cannabis use caused an increase of emergency room visits. Those that are using cannabis, 22% higher percentage of those folks end up in the emergency room. What's the correlation between cannabis use and showing up in your local emergency room?
Well, there are a couple of problems with cannabis use. One is your grandfather's cannabis use is not your cannabis use. That is, it is much more potent right now. It's been, if you will, grown over the generations to select those with most potent toxins in them. Secondly, if you will, not only is it more potent, but vaping or smoking it is never good because it increases your allergic responses, it decreases lung function, and it causes inflammation throughout your body. So it is actually vaping, because of the particles released in the air, is actually much worse for those around you than is just even smoking a cigarette or anything. Or obviously, if you get it in a gummy, it is safer
Wait,
for all.
go back to that vaping point. So you're saying if you are around someone vaping, it's almost like being around a smoker. Is that secondhand smoke impact?
No, it's actually much worse.
It's
The
worse.
studies show that compared to equal amounts of time, smoking a cigarette, it only gives 1/5 of the particles in the air for secondhand, the dangerous particles, we call them PM2.5 to 10, of those particles that cause inflammation in you. Now, it's not just in your lung. When you take it into your lung, you get a immune response to it because it's looked at as a foreign particle, and that immune response is what causes the heart disease and the stroke, and even causes the bladder cancer and the other cancers associated with tobacco. We expect that they will be even higher in secondhand vapors, that is, people around people vaping.
Wow. Okay. So talk about, are there any uses of cannabis products that are safer? Obviously, you just said vaping, no. I assume you would say smoking smoking marijuana, no to that as well.
Yeah, and the gummies, the edibles are fine. The one thing that has been shown to be beneficial, people use it for pain relief, or they're really just, if you will, doing the same thing as you're doing alcohol for pain relief or non-steroidals. They're changing their mind function, so they aren't doing as much. But the one thing that
hold that thought, because this came up with Brittany Griner. You know, the WNBA star that's now being detained in Russia. Her team says that she had the cannabis oil and she had a medical prescription for cannabis for pain reduction because it has an anti-inflammatory component. Is that not true?
That's true. So the cannabis oil, or the local use of it, is effective, but because it's a Schedule 1 medication, if you will, we don't really have good data on that. But what the data look like, the one thing that is predictable in all of the studies is that it is useful for sleep. So using it 3 or 4 nights a week to help you sleep seems to be a effective use of cannabis. It may be useful for a whole bunch of other things, and local anti-inflammatory, whether you use a non-steroidal locally or cannabis locally, may be related to side effects, but it seems to help some people. Now, the question is it a greater effect than a placebo response? And the problem is we just don't have good data on that because it has been a Schedule 1 drug. So, if you will, do we need the FDA to put it into a different schedule so it can be studied and we know where it is beneficial? Absolutely.